creating those moments where she knows that she has your undivided attention and she is able to really connect, and you are constantly curious about what is going on in her heart, and you express that to her.
Welcome to the Mama Bear Apologetics Podcast,
a podcast where we teach you to roar like a mother.
And by roar, we mean recognize the message, offer discernment, argue for a healthier approach, and reinforce these ideas with your kids.
Unless you want to growl around your house. I mean, that's cool too. You're like, check it. We keep it reals. That's so bad.
You're awesome. Mama Bear Apologetics is a listener-supported program, so if you like what we do, head on over to the Mama Bear Apologetics website and click support.
It's time to rise up, ladies.
Rise up, Mama Bears. This might not affect your faith,
but it might affect your children's. Hey there, Mama Bears and Papa Bears. Welcome to another Mama Bear Apologetics podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping you raise children who think critically, love biblically, and stand firm in the faith using truth and reason. Well, if you are here from our last podcast, you're probably binging it because it was so good. We have Ricky Chalette with us here today, and we are talking about a super important issue regarding how to raise your children to have a healthy concept of their own gender. So, Ricky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Amy. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Oh, this has just been amazing. I mean, I'm just eating it up as we are discussing. But before we dive in, which I'm very much looking forward to, can you tell us a little bit about your ministry, Living Hope?
Yeah, Living Hope's been around for 35 years, and our mission is that we seek to proclaim God's truth as we journey with those seeking sexual and relational wholeness through a more intimate relationship with Jesus. Our primary focus has been helping individuals who have homosexuality, same-sex attraction, gender confusion of some kind, help them walk out of that identity and into their relationship with Christ at a more intimate level. Wow. And we have support groups for everything, male, female, single, married, all that. And then we also have support groups for friends and family of those who love them, as well as a Hope House that we have for young men between 18 and 26 years old who need to kind of separate themselves from maybe some of the things that they were involved in and get a more highly accountable living situation where we disciple them, mentor them, walk with them, help them understand who they are in Christ. And then we go into churches and organizations to talk about how to respond redemptively to the LGBTQ ideologies in the world. So yeah, just a few things.
Just a couple of things, that are so incredibly important today because, this LGBTQ ideology is being marketed to our children from the time that they're toddlers. I mean, Blues Clues and Bubble Guppies is indoctrinating our kids. And so having resources to be able to speak life into them at such a young age is vital to proper biblical discipleship of our kids because that's the battlefield that they're on right now. And so I'm so grateful for y'all's ministry being there and especially providing that support group for families who maybe have an extended family member or a child who is wrestling with these issues because so often those family members, they feel very isolated. And I've talked to some who they're just ashamed to even bring it up in their life group because they don't want anyone to know. And so they kind of feel isolated in wrestling with this issue. And you provide counseling and support for those family members so they don't feel alone.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, one of the things we hear from friends and family, the parents particularly all the time is, gosh, I love my church. I love my small group. They're all wonderful people. Yeah. But we just knew if we shared this with our small group, they would all look at us like, we're a one-eyed monster and not know what to do. Or they're fearful that they're going to be judged as bad parents because they have a kid that's gone, in a different direction than they are. Yeah. And so being able to have a safe place to be able to unload all of that and to have some folks around you that have journeyed those same paths and found what worked and what didn't work and be able to share that so they don't have to make the same mistakes is huge.
Yeah. Oh, and I can testify to that because even doing conferences and speaking regarding biblical sexuality, it's surprising how many people, when they're vulnerable and they say, this is what my child is going through, or family member, there's always 2 or 3 other people in the audience who are like, really? Me too. And it is so empowering to know that, wait a second, for one, God built us for community within the church. And there are going to be people who are further along in the same walk that you're on. And if we're just vulnerable and sharing that, we can get connected to so much godly wisdom that's already in place.
Yeah, no, that's so important.
So, last episode, we talked about how to nurture gender healthy boys. And now in this one, I want us to focus on the girls of the group. And so, with the boys, they're often kind of classified rough and tumble and sensitive. Now, do we get that same classification, or is it a little different for the girls?
It's a little different. And, me talking about girls as a boy is
Yeah.
just, this is dangerous territory already. So it's going to be
Might get
interesting.
something lobbed at my head.
That's right. I'm already gonna make the disclaimer. I'm not a girl, so I'm obviously, I don't understand everything about women the way I ought
Yep.
to.
That's okay.
That being said, I have walked with many a girls through this whole process. So
Mhm.
yes, they do also have sort of two extremes of personality. One we would call sort of the girly girl,
Okay.
which I think everybody knows by the name. She
Yep.
loves, all the girly things and the frills
Mhm.
and the baubles and the, bows and the pink and all that stuff. And then you've
Mhm.
got what I would call a tomboy girl
Okay.
who is not really that interested in those things. She's 100% girl, but at the same time, she is much more sporty. Typically, she has much more interest in outdoorsy kinds of things. She
Yeah.
doesn't have such an interest in all of the cosmetic aspects of her life. She wants to look nice and all that, like everybody does,
Mhm.
but she's not as obsessed about appearance in the same way that a girly girl might be.
Okay. So now how does that break down for personality wise? So would you say that maybe the tomboy girl, she's a little bit more reserved in her emotional expression, whereas the girly girl is all, just ready to sit down and dish, as they say? How do
No,
we see that
actually,
kind of
it's
personality?
it's actually kind of the opposite. The
Really?
tomboy girl is typically the most sensitive of the two. She's the one who has this really high sense of justice and
Mm-hmm.
wants to make things right, and she's really willing to step in and at a moment's notice to defend others that are being wronged. She
Wow.
can get her feelings hurt really easily. She's very
Mm-hmm.
aware of people's perception around her, whereas the girly girl is a bit more self-absorbed in some
Oh,
ways,
okay.
and can often be much meaner. I mean, if you've ever seen the movie
Okay.
Mean Girls,
Mean girl.
those are
That's
all
exactly what came to my head.
yeah, that those are girly girls.
Okay.
But it's the group of cheerleaders, who are there and they even talk bad about each other when the other person's not around.
Yeah.
So they have all those opportunities to kind of, get the better on someone else. They'll certainly take advantage of that. And there seems to be a lot more competition in some ways
Mm.
for, who's the most influential, who's the most manipulative, who's the most
Yeah.
controlling.
Mm.
Whereas with the tomboy girl, she's competitive, but
Mm-hmm.
more on a like a physical level or a sporty level, not so much on I'm gonna one up you and make sure I'm the most popular. She's not as concerned about that as she is
Yeah.
about making sure things are done rightly.
Mm. So it almost seems like the tomboy girl, the competitiveness is more in a teamwork fashion. Like, how can we as a team be successful?
Yeah,
Or potentially is more the girly girl is more self-focused, as in like, okay, you're more like an accessory to me, and how can I use you maybe to advance
exactly.
myself? But it's that sort of that catty
Yeah.
competition that's there.
Yes.
Fascinating. Okay, that makes sense. And you see that not only in and the sort of the stereotypical movies as well, but also in high school. Gosh, I remember seeing all the cliques and everything. And that's one of the reasons why I liked hanging out with guys, because guys, if you bring a bag of Doritos and make them laugh, they're willing to let you hang out. Like they don't care. Whereas like some of the girl groups, it's, oh, you not only have to maybe connect on an emotional level, but you also have to advance us in some way. And I'm just like, man, I know I'm
Yep.
just totally gonna jack that up. So I always gravitated for the guys because they were just so much easier to hang out
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
That
And if
is,
you like some of the things they like, if you like sports and that
yeah,
kind of stuff, then hey, you got great conversation for hours.
yeah.
So yeah.
So now, do the girls do they have those same core things that the guys need? That affirmation, attention, affection. Is that what they from the tomboy girls to the girly girls? Are they striving after that same thing?
Absolutely, they are. I think all of us are. The interesting thing about them, however, is that they receive it in very different ways from both the dad and the mom. So they both need to be involved, the mom and the dad. I mean, they did
Hmm.
that for the boys as well, but
Right.
in very intentional ways. And what's really interesting to me is that the intentionality on the part of both the father and the mother are really in some ways counterintuitive to what males and females typically would want to do. And what do I mean by that?
Yeah, I
For
was gonna
instance,
say you
with
got to
me,
explain.
yeah. What I mean by that is Like dad has to give affirmation, attention, and affection to the girl in a way that affirms being.
Okay.
In other words, he's not gonna just say, "Oh wow, you have a great 3-point shot from the outside of the court,"
Right.
or "I love how disciplined you are," or I'm really proud of you for doing X, Y, Z.
Hmm.
He needs to affirm those things for sure, but more importantly, he needs to affirm that it's great that she's a female, that she's a
Oh,
woman, that she's
yeah.
different than him. And so when it comes to the affirmation of her from the dad, it's going to
Hmm.
be about her being. So dad has to get to that place where he is affirming the girl as beautiful.
Mm.
And that's a really powerful, as a woman, you know this,
Yeah.
that's a super powerful word. That's very different than being cute or
Hmm.
pretty or hot. You tell your daughter she's hot, she's going to end up in counseling and you should be
Yeah,
beautiful.
that
You know,
makes for a weird Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, really weird. So, but yeah, he needs to be able to affirm her beauty in her
Mm.
and let her know that he sees the beauty in her. And beautiful is, to me a very powerful thing, and I
Hmm.
know it is to women in general, but beauty indicates something more than just an outward appearance.
Yeah.
It's actually a personhood that
Hmm.
that is affirmed in you, that internally and externally we see something in you that is a gift of God and appealing and
Yeah.
beautiful. And so dad affirms that. The attention that dad gives to the girl has to do with him, once again, acknowledging the reality of the extremes of her emotion. Like
Mm.
she feels things that he doesn't feel.
Right.
She notices things that he doesn't notice. And so, when she cries because she sees a squirrel that got hit on the road,
Hmm.
and she sees a little squirrel struggling, he's not quite dead yet, and she's upset about
Yeah.
that. And she's boohooing about it. He doesn't need to scold her
Hmm.
or demean her for it. He actually
Mm.
needs to affirm it and say, "Oh, honey, this is God made you with a tender heart, and that's so good because he's made you to nurture and love and care and create safe
Mm.
places for people. And you see that little squirrel, and I'm sure it's going to go to, well, it's going to be with Jesus maybe one day. I don't know, but
Little
but
squirrely heaven.
yeah, squirrely heaven, with the lions and the lambs. I don't know,
Right. Right.
but he just reassures her that her feelings are appropriate,
Yeah.
and that they're understandable.
Mm.
And then when it comes to affection, he needs to, I tell dad, you can't love on, kiss on, hug on, snuggle with, or spoon with your little girl too much. It's just
Mm.
impossible. As long as you're being appropriate, obviously.
Right. Right. Right.
But you just can't do that too much. And what happens in that process, and it's usually pretty natural for dads to do that, especially when little girls are young.
Oh,
They
yeah.
love snuggling with their daughters and that sort of thing. But it's important because what the girl learns in that process is, what does appropriate affection feel like for me?
Mm.
This is safe.
Yeah.
This is secure. This is transmitting love to me in a very positive way. It is not
Mm.
seeking to gain something from me. It is actually giving something to me. And so dads, when they demonstrate that, help that little girl to get a great sense of, wow, I am to be valued. I am
Mm.
to be um, seen and understood as beautiful and competent and capable and all that. And so dad creates, by doing that, this environment of safety and security that surrounds this little girl. So he becomes, in a real way, kind of her knight in shining armor. He's the
Yeah.
guy that she runs to if there is a problem, because he will make it safe. He will make it
Mm.
secure. And so all of that, though, is kind of counter to necessarily what dads are kind of wired to do, because dads are doers.
Yeah.
We want to fix it.
Fixers. Yep. Oh,
Yeah, we're
yes.
fixers. And so, we want to affirm the things that we see. So, like I said, when you make that great 3-point shot, I want to tell you how awesome it is. And when you run
Yeah.
the great race, I want to tell you. And when you cry like crazy, and I want to go, hey, shut up. It's okay. Get over it.
Get
Um,
over it. Yes.
yeah, same thing with even with the affection, we have to be careful
Mm.
because sometimes dads can get too rough.
Hmm.
They can slap them around and wait, I'm a girl, that hurt. Like, you can't
Right.
do
Right.
that like you do with my brothers.
Hmm.
And so she needs to feel that sense of security. But like I said, dad doesn't need to just affirm the doing of her life. He needs to
Hmm.
affirm the being of her life. Okay. Does
Wow.
that make sense? Does that
Oh gosh, no, that makes so much sense. And there's an influencer. His name is Nick. I forget the last little bit of it, but he made a video that I was watching the other day. And what he said is that when he had a daughter, he wanted to go to the two people that he knew he would get great advice from. He went to his mom. He goes because she's a woman, so she would know. And he goes, but he also went to a guy friend who was known as being very promiscuous as a guy. And he goes, okay, how how can I raise up my daughter so that she doesn't fall for guys like you? And then what he told this guy, and the guy laughed, and he goes, honestly, be as disconnected as possible. Because when you're disconnected, your daughter won't know what good, healthy love is. They won't know what true affection is. And then when she comes to me for that, then I can basically do whatever I want because she's not going to have that guardrail, that boundary, that litmus test of, okay, what actually is good, healthy, and
right?
actually affirming. And I
That's
mean, that,
exactly true.
yeah.
Yeah.
And two, I really liked how you affirmed the need for affirming beauty, because there were articles that I've read before about how women, if they're called cute, they see that as sort of dismissive, but there's something about being called beautiful that speaks toward the wholeness of the individual, the woman. And so, especially as a girl, when she hits puberty and man, everything's just going haywire, and you're comparing yourself. So many of these girls now are comparing themselves to all of these hyper filtered influencers online. Beautiful is the last thing she feels. And so I think it's so important. I love the affirmation to affirm that beauty, because it can also help protect the girl from these false misrepresentations of beauty, to where our culture loves to rebrand and twist language to where now they've tried to repackage this whole sexy provocative as, oh, that's what beauty is. So
Right.
many of these girls, I think, are looking at these more suggestive displays, whether it's in clothing or behavior or relationships. And because it's been repackaged as, oh, this is what beauty is, and they haven't gotten that foundational knowledge from maybe mom or dad, they're falling for this worldly corruption.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was talking to a dad last week that was so upset because his like 10-year-old daughter, he saw her posing for
Mhm.
these selfies that she was taking and all these different poses and all this
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of really kind of suggestive sort of,
Mhm.
positions and posing. And
Yeah,
he got really upset about it. He's like, where is she getting that from? And I was like,
yeah,
everywhere she looks, you
yeah,
know, I mean, literally social media is filled with this kind of imagery
yeah.
and she's trying to be affirmed
Mhm.
in that beauty,
Yeah.
to say, hey, I want somebody to notice me. I want them to see me. And I said, she has no idea what the implications of that might be, but
Mhm.
she knows that she needs that affirmation. So I said, hey, how much time are you spending with her? What kind of things are you doing with her? Are you affirming, the beauty that you see in her? He said, well, of course she's beautiful. I'm like, well, of course you know that, but are
Right.
you communicating that? And he
Mm.
goes, well, I guess I really don't ever say that to her. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, well, she can't read your mind, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's really important. And males are really bad about that because we
Mm.
think, if we've said it once, then we've said it.
Feel like we're
We don't
good.
need to keep
Yeah.
repeating it.
Mhm.
And so even like in marriages, I mean, I've counseled with married couples and said, oh, how often does your husband tell you he loves you? And she said, well, he told me when we got married he loved me. And I said, well, it's been 10 years now,
How's that
and
going?
he says, well, hey, I told you if I change my mind, I'll let you know,
Oh, jeez.
and I'm like, no, wait, you
Yeah.
got to say it all the time.
Oh,
And
man.
so the dad needs to communicate that to
Mhm.
the little girl on a regular basis, how beautiful she is, how proud he
Mhm.
is of her, all those kinds of things. And he also needs to differentiate the fact that though she may be like him in some ways, she is
Mhm.
more like her mother than she is
Yeah.
like him. And
Mm.
yeah, she may want to go deer hunting with him or ride the four-wheeler or go fishing or whatever, but at the end of the day, she's actually more like her mom than she is like him, you know. And so he needs to be able to affirm how awesome it is that God has made you like your mom because you have
Yeah.
amazing mom,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Well, and I love that because, in our last podcast, we were talking about boys. Naturally, of course, it's dad's got to be that manly influence so that boys can learn manhood. So, with regards to the affirmation, attention, and affection, like it would seem like mom also plays a really pivotal role in this for the girls as well. So, we've kind of spoken to the dad. So, what can moms do to help with their daughters?
Yeah.
Because I know that there was a study that I was reading. It was a psychological study, and it was finding that even in young girls, they're noticing how a lot of their sort of body awareness is shaped also by mom, to where if mom is like hypercritical of her own looks, her daughter will start becoming hypercritical of her own looks. So it seems like for moms, what can we as moms do?
Yeah, moms, and again, this is a counterintuitive thing to some degree. Rather than, you would think moms would be all about the being,
Yeah.
but actually, mom has to, what I would call, she becomes the doer. She becomes the example. She becomes the
Yeah.
model of all of the things that she wants to be.
Hmm.
Okay, so mom has to demonstrate, what is it in her affirmation of the girl? What is it like to be a woman? Like, it's
Mm.
awesome to be a woman. I love
Yeah.
being a woman. I love being, your dad's wife and our marriage. And I love the interaction that we have and the way we share with each other.
Hmm.
I love that I get to raise you kids and nurture you kids and invest in you children. And, the girl needs to look at her mom and say, oh my gosh, my mom is amazing. Like, I
Yeah.
want to be like her when I grow up. She rocks
Mm.
the house. She takes care of everything. She can do it. Like, if
Yeah.
there's going to be if you want to get something done, give it to my mom. She will take care of it. And so the girl needs to feel that sense of power and
Mm.
empowerment that she gets from her mother. That says, look at me. I'm smart, I'm competent, I'm capable, I'm all
Yeah.
that. And the girl feels good about it. So that would be the affirmation.
Mm.
The attention is, the girl needs to learn, how do I deal with feelings? These
Mm.
feelings are overwhelming
Yeah.
sometimes. And so, mom, what do I do? How do I handle this? So, when, for example, mom's mother dies, and be the girl's grandmother.
Yeah.
Um, how does mom handle that? Of
Mm.
course, she is distraught. She's in grief. She
Mm.
cries. She may be even sad for a while. But in all of the grief and sadness, she doesn't stop being mom. She
Mm.
she continues to press through. She does what she needs to do to take care of her family. She rises to the occasion. Now, it doesn't mean a year later she doesn't pick up the phone to go call her mom, thinking, that she can talk to her,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden burst out in tears because she
Right.
realizes, well, mom's gone.
Hmm.
And the little girl sees that. And what do you do?
Hmm.
Well, she says to the little girl, honey, you know me. She said, every day, 3, 4, 5 times a day, I talk to your granny.
Hmm.
And she says, I just miss her so much. And she
Hmm.
said, there are times when I just think, oh, I want to tell her about what's going on, and you're getting ready to go to school and you're going to do this event. I was going to call her and just say, hey. And I realized, oh my gosh, it's such a habit. But
Yeah.
she said, we're going to see her one day again. And I know that. And
Mm.
so I grieve, but not like those without hope. And,
Yeah.
and it's okay to feel those things. So she lets
Yeah.
her know that, all right, wow, these feelings are intense, but they serve a bigger purpose. And God has
Mm.
given you those feelings for this nurturing relationships that you will have. And then finally, the affection part of it, I think it's important for moms to do girly things with their girls early
Mm.
and often. And
Mm.
so those are becoming more difficult to identify as to what
Yeah.
girly things are
Yeah.
uh, in our modern world, because guys seem to do all the girly things too nowadays. But
Yeah.
there are some unique things that girls do, I've been told. Um,
It's a
you know,
mystery.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think obviously the sex talks that need to happen
Yeah.
about just maturation process and menarche, those kind of things that are
Right.
so critical for moms to have discussions with their daughters, and to
Mm.
let them know, what is this going to look like? What is this going
Hmm.
to feel like? What does this mean? What's the significance of it? Why it's a beautiful thing rather
Right.
than a torturous, horrible thing.
Right.
Even though it can involve pain, obviously, that
Mm.
kind of thing. But to help her understand that, make sense of that, but then also, the what we might consider kind of typical American Western girly things, like,
Yeah.
maybe taking her at some point, to the L'Oreal counter and sitting down and doing a makeover, just
Hmm.
the two of you and the lady, to
Hmm.
try to say, okay, well, what would you like? And what do you think about this? And
Hmm.
let's try some different things, or hairstyles, or those kind of things,
Yeah.
as well as just the mom, you know, doing girly stuff with the girl, like braiding the hair, or doing
Mm.
grooming things, or teaching her how to do the things that are girl things that are different than dad things,
Yeah.
you know, and being able to show that all those things are not less than, or worse, or weak, or somehow insignificant in some way, but they're actually valuable and part of what it means to be built in the casing, if you will, that God has given you. and
Mm.
and that's not a bad thing, it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
And so she sees that affection from her mom. She knows what those touches feel like from another woman,
Hmm.
that is positive, and she allows the girl to have this deep emotional connection with her that is both healthy but also boundaried.
Yeah.
And so it shows her, yeah, as a girl, you're going to have some BFFs, some
Hmm.
best friends forever, but you're not gonna cross boundaries with those best
Hmm.
friends, and you're not going to do inappropriate sexual things with those best friends.
Yeah.
These are going to be like sisters to you through your life.
Yeah.
And so what does that look like? And mom demonstrates, again, she's the doer in all of these
Yeah.
things. So when mom does those things and dad does the things he's supposed to do, you get both the example of
Right.
how this lives out and the affirmation of the being of the reality that God has created you in this unique way. And it turns out to be a really strong girl that comes out of that situation.
Wow. What struck me out as we're discussing this is how counterculture this is. Like I think of TV shows. I mean, TV shows, right? They not only reflect someone's perception of the world, but they also have the effect of shaping it as well. To where I think of shows like Modern Family, to where the girls will blow up and the moms are just like, I don't know what to do, or the moms will blow up and just kind of model this sort of degrading behavior, not only to husband, but also degrading behavior to daughter. There's not that self-control being modeled or being held accountable to from the daughter, to where, so many moms, I think today, that's been our only discipling influence, to where we think, oh, this is how a mother-daughter relationship is supposed to be. It's just supposed to be awkward and angry and outbursts. And, it's mom versus daughter, with dad being the referee. And sometimes, the guy going behind enemy lines to, appease the daughter in some way. And yet what you have just articulated is there's that modeling of self-control in the mother, of how to be confident in a woman and embrace womanhood, and being able to nurture an understanding of even just that prepubescent process in life. And then dads as well, how to be respectful and what to seek for in a spouse. I mean, you just don't see that.
Right.
Not in culture. It is just incredible.
Yeah, and I think too, when you look at where we are culturally,
Mhm.
especially with women, I'm very concerned about our young girls because
Yes.
we're coming through this age of Me Too,
Yep.
of women being oppressed,
Mhm.
men only want women for their sexuality. Added to that, social influencers, media celebrities, Hollywood stars,
Yeah.
all using their sexuality as a weapon to manipulate men and control men,
Mhm.
showing young girls that really the only commodity you have of worth is your sexuality.
Yeah.
And I think that is so wrong because
Mm.
yes, sexuality is incredibly powerful. I mean, obviously we have fought wars over men and their desire for women, you
Mhm.
know, but at the end of the day, that is not how God created, the only aspect that God created in a woman is her sexuality.
Right.
It is incredibly important. You're the bringer forth of life into the world. So
Mhm.
in that sense, sex is incredibly important. But at the same time, you're not really created to use that sexuality for the control of other people.
Yeah.
That is a gift that you should give to a husband that you're committed to for the rest of your life, and he to
Mhm.
you. It's not something that you simply throw out there as a commodity that people purchase or use or abuse. But
Yeah.
yet, we live in a culture that on the one hand says, "Oh yeah, girls, that's all you're good for. Feel
Yeah.
terrible about it." And then on the other hand says, "But that's the only way you're going to survive, so you better learn how to market it." And I'm
Oh,
like, "Well,
yeah.
how does a girl live through that?" You know?
Yeah. And I mean, you see that through third and fourth wave feminism. It's your body is now something to be used to get ahead in life. It's an aspect of that boss girl mentality of, ladies, you're supposed to use guys the way guys originally were using, or not originally, but how they would toxically use women. And that's now being packaged as empowerment, is go make an OnlyFans account. Get ahead in life by using your body. This is how you achieve the American dream and be satisfied and empowered in the process. And it's so deeply degrading, but yet everybody is hiding it simply for the fact of either getting ahead or buying into this false view of empowerment.
Yeah, and it's so sad because I've talked to girls that, have bought into that reality, that are struggling with their sexual identity. And here they are, on a Instagram account or, an OnlyFans account, trying to put forth this like super sultry, super
Yeah.
sexy vixen, if you will.
Yes.
And at the same time being unbelievably insecure about who they are as a woman, feeling
Yeah.
like no one will ever love them, nobody ever cares about them. And
Mhm.
of course, in that process, what happens is those who they're catering to are always demanding more. And
Yes.
as a result of that, they're going deeper and darker
Mhm.
and losing their sense of self in the mix of it all. And then
Yeah.
sometimes running to then say, okay, wow, these men that want me and are watching me actually are everything that I was told that they would be. And
Right.
so the only safe place for me is to run into the arms of a woman who is not going to mistreat me and abuse me that way.
Yeah.
And that can even be, you know, really pushed if the person is abused as a child,
Yeah.
sexually, physically, then they're like, gosh, what do I, that's the only thing I know. And that's the only thing I'm good for.
Right.
And they have this huge sense of this crushing sense of their spirit that doesn't allow them to flourish or have a voice or speak. And they find these outlets to be able to do some of that. And it's just heartbreaking to me.
Yeah.
Um, the best of surveys nowadays say that 1 out of every 3 girls is going to experience sexual abuse by the time she's 18 years old.
Yeah.
And when I think about the girls that have come through Living Hope, I would say probably if they're under 35, if they're over 35, I would say it's probably 60% of them have had sexual molestation as a child. If they're under 35, it's probably a little bit less, but not a whole lot less, maybe the 40s, 45%. But I think that number is going up because I think the proliferation of pornography and the objectification of humanity that happens because of that is causing both males and females to simply just look at people as objects of pleasure and sexuality as nothing more than a handshake or a greeting, And so we've completely separated the idea of procreation from the sexual union, which to me should never have happened. But we've done that. And so now it's just, hey, this is a way for me to get more followers. It's a way for me to get more attention. It's a way for me to have this huge intimate sense of self in the moment. This, as I call it, the intensity of sexuality rather than the intimacy of real sexuality.
Right.
And our girls are having a hard time kind of unraveling all of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's one thing that I uncovered in the research for our book, too, is that our culture has shifted to this hypersexualization of youth, and it's grooming boys to consume where it's grooming girls to objectify, because it takes longer for girls to want to engage in this degrading behavior. It takes longer to set the foundations to make them think that this is okay. And it's usually a series of either tragic relationships, experiences, or toxic influences that they're seeing in culture to get them to the state where they're like, oh yeah, this is just how I operate on a Friday night, is I hop on my hookup app and just connect with a guy because that's what the world has told me is good. And these guys are being groomed from early exposure to pornography toward, and false discipleship of other men saying, oh yeah, boys will be boys. This is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to look for in a girl. She's supposed to look like a model, dress suggestively, and be sexually aggressive. And we're actually grooming a culture for this societal brokenness just by how it's been marketed to boys and girls. And it makes perfect sense why instances of abuse have occurred, especially in the lives of women, because women are groomed to emulate this worldview while they don't want the fallout from it. They live out this worldview so often, and yet they desire a heavenly outcome, and it's not possible, and they don't understand that. And yet these guys have been groomed to buy into this worldview of, oh, this is how a relationship's supposed to be. In fact, there was one statistic that I found with regard to teen boys. They were asked, do the relationships that you see in pornography, do you think that's real? And 60% of them, of those surveyed, said, yes, I think it's real, and I can't wait till it happens to me. And yet these are the girls, they're now being groomed through, even just these hypersexualized dolls that are being trumpeted as fashion dolls. This is just fashion to dress in this provocative way. And yet those are the same outfits on the dolls in the girls' toy aisle that are now in the porns and in these, action adventure movies to where this is how the girl's supposed to be displayed. And they're not recognizing that they're being groomed to a secular sexual worldview that ultimately has their objectification at the heart of it.
Yeah. Yeah, so many of our guys who come through Living Hope who get to the place where they're even interested in dating girls, came saying, hey, I'm same-sex attracted, but they reach a level of healing where they say, yeah, I think I want to explore that. And they're, oftentimes in their late 20s, sometimes early 30s, and they start dating women. And one of the things they've come to me repeatedly and said, here, I'm trying to be a godly man in this relationship. I'm trying to honor women. I'm not seeking to have sex with a woman before I get married. And I'm on the second date with a girl, and I literally have to pull her away from me because she's all on me. And I'm having to say, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not going to do that. Well, then she's angry because she said, you don't really like me. you don't really care about me. He's like, no, I do. I'm trying to respect you. And you told me you
Yeah.
were Christian. Like, why is this okay?
Yeah.
You know, but they have been so programmed by our culture to believe that if you don't absolutely desire to do that the first date, then somehow maybe you're not really a guy enough, or you're not
Right.
really thinking she's beautiful enough, or
Hmm.
they assign all these emotional realities to that lack of action or lack
Hmm.
of desire to just hurry up and go to bed, you
Hmm.
know. And it's really sad that people don't get to even know each other in the
Yeah.
culture that we have today. It's just, hey, we're going to exchange the most intimate thing we possibly can, our bodies, with each other
Right.
before we even know what our last names are or what your
Yeah.
favorite color is. And
Hmm.
I'm like, what is up with that?
Oh gosh, and that was the funniest part. There was an article that came out after COVID, and they were talking about actually COVID was better for relationships because what it said is people were struggling with intimacy, and what this psychologist said, well, what you need to do is actually get to know the person first, and then intimacy is better. It's like shocker when you know the individual, the intimacy is better, and
Yeah,
I mean that was God's design all along, and.
absolutely.
And one thing, this isn't just reserved for adult women too. I mean, even young women and teen girls like this to engage in this at a very young age is cultivated as a rite of passage. And this is how there was a movie called, or a show called Atypical. And the female character, she was a teen and she sleeping with her boyfriend. That was, oh, I'm an adult now. It was seen as this sort of developmental milestone to achieve. And I mean, I've known teen boys who have been very frustrated even to try and date within high school because all the girls are very promiscuous and like what you were sharing, they're wrestling with that. They're like, are you kidding me? Like I want to have a relationship and the girl just wants to be in the bedroom. And
Yeah.
even guys are very frustrated with this as well.
Very much so. Yeah, I just think that's the world we're living in today. And it's
Yeah.
so crazy. So
Yeah.
crazy. And Amy, I think, in talking about all this, like, what does it look like for girls? What does it look
Yeah.
like for boys? How do we do that? One of the things that I've contemplated a long time and suggested to lots of parents is, we don't in the West really have what I would call rites of passage for boys or girls. I think we do it a little
Good
more for
point.
girls in
Yeah.
the sense that they naturally go through a physiological change that is evident to everyone in some
Right.
way.
Oh yeah.
So there is like, moms do talk typically to their daughters about, okay, your body's going to change. You're going to have to, you're having a period
Hmm.
and this is what it means and all that. And you can have children now. So you need to be careful, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where, but and that's assuming that moms even have that talk. Lots of
Right.
them, do, by the
Yeah,
way.
they don't.
Yeah. But that's a little more natural, kind of has to happen. Whereas with guys, there's not any kind of rite of passage at all.
Mm,
So boys don't really know when they become men. It
yeah.
used to be there were things that happened culturally that moved us. I mean, in tribal times, obviously the boys moved from the mother's fire, the women's fire to the male fire, or
Hmm.
and moved into the warrior's hut at some point. And when they did, they knew that they were a man, you
Yeah.
know. Well, nowadays we don't really have anything like that. It used to be when you went off to college way
Yeah.
back in the that was kind of, oh, you're on your own, you're going off to
Yeah.
college, getting a job, you're going to get married shortly. And of course, back then we got married much, much younger.
Right.
Nowadays, we're not getting married, boys and girls, until they're 28, 29, 30 years old.
Yeah.
And so not only are we extending the length of time for temptation to be significant,
Hmm.
but we're also delaying the maturation process and the perception of oneself as
Yeah.
a grown adult
Wow.
who really needs to function as an adult. And so I think if parents would kind of give some thought to that, and I've talked to a lot of my friends that particularly have boys, to say, what would it look like to gather a bunch of men that know your kid, that know your family, that know you, when that boy's 11 or 12 years old, taking them out someplace and gathering these men, let these men affirm this boy for what they have seen in his life, the manly characteristics they
Wow.
see in him, the giftings that he has, and then even maybe to present him with something, a ring, a chain, something that would indicate, we now see you as a part of the
Yeah.
godly man crew,
Right.
and we want you to be a part of this team. And I think that would be so significant. I thought about that particularly in terms of when you see inner city kind of conflicts and difficulties where boys often don't have significant males in their lives. Uh, I think one of the reasons people join gangs or want to be a part of those kind of things is not
Yeah.
for what those gangs do, it's for what those gangs feel when those
Mm,
are with them and the
yeah.
opportunity to be connected to other males and be affirmed in those ways.
Yeah.
So I think it's something parents can think about and maybe incorporate into the the discipleship of their children. And by the way, just to think about the fact that you actually have to intentionally disciple your child. Like this
Yes.
doesn't happen automatically.
I know.
Um,
Yeah, it doesn't. And it's
no.
trial and error. And there's
Yeah.
parts you're going to mess up terribly and they'll become a funny story later, but
Yeah.
they shouldn't stop you from doing that. And, I love how you talk about, that symbolic, because when I went through basic training, what it was is once you passed through Warrior Week, which at the time it was week 5, you had to basically simulate a deployment. You ate MREs, you went through the gas chamber, you shot M16s. It was so much fun. But at the end, so prior to those 5 weeks, we were always called trainee. And then once you passed, you were presented with an airman's coin, and that's when you were called airman. And it was like that coin was so meaningful. Even now, this was ages ago. And when I see that coin, you get that sense of pride of, this was a mark in a shift of identity, development, all of those things. And it's just funny what those little things, how meaningful they can be.
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's at the same time, it's very biblical in the sense that, we raise our Ebenezer, we build an altar.
Yeah.
All those kinds of things in scripture were things that people did in order to remember.
Yeah.
That's why we did them because we don't remember well, especially if things are good. Now we may remember tragedies, but if they're good things, we tend not to remember them. If you're in a class somewhere and your teacher praises you for everything but makes one critical comment about you, it's the one critical comment you seem to mull over in your mind over and over again. Read reviews of whatever you're doing and you'll remember the ones that were critical, not the ones that said, "Oh my gosh, you changed my life. You gave me this insight. It was so wonderful." You won't remember that.
Yeah.
So we need to have those helps, if you will, along the way that cause us. So I think, one of the things we do at the Hope House is when the guys graduate from the Hope House, we give them this James Avery cross sword thing that is kind of a combination of a sword and a cross.
Yeah.
And we affirm them. We give them all of their quiet times that they wrote for the whole, their reports that they turn in every day and stuff like that, so they can see the progress of their growth. And we bless them. And it's been really cool to see guys who've come through that program, years and years later, when they're in their mid 30s, they're now raising kids and they still have those chains on with those crosses. And I've asked them about it and they said, "You don't know how many times I've thought about the things that y'all taught me or the things that you said, in that moment when I got this, because I felt like, wow, I had really fought for a whole year. I did all this work. I did all these things. I was, it was hard to do. I faced a lot of demons I didn't want to face, but I got to the end and y'all were like, yeah, man, you've made it. Like, this is good. You're on your way. You've got what it takes to make it happen."
Wow.
And that was super meaningful to them. And I think, wow, why can't every kid have that experience?
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, we've done this with the guys, but with the girls, because I know especially mother-daughter relationships can be quite tenuous. And so what happens, or what suggestions do you have for maybe parents who are looking to connect with their kid that they are just not clicking with? For the girls, what are some things that you have found that are helpful?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is girls are serendipitous in their need for time. And what I mean by that is they don't necessarily just want to sit down with mom or dad and say, "Oh, let's have this deep conversation about all these really emotional things." That's not typically how they work.
Okay.
But what they will do is they want to talk to you about what's going on in their heart and their mind, but they need to have spaces for little drips and drabs of information to come out.
Yeah.
So like when mom's bringing, picking up the kid from the middle school or high school and she's driving her home or going to the next activity or whatever, ask questions about how was your day and, what's going on and tell me about whatever. What did you learn? Open-ended questions that don't have right or wrong answers, or just let her talk. If you see she's upset, you can say, "Wow, looks like you had a rough day today. What's going on?" And let her talk and realize she's probably not going to tell you the whole story. But then later on that evening, there may be a time after dinner where she finds you not occupied with something else and is able to come and say, "Hey, we're talking about earlier, well, here's some more stuff about that. And this is what happened. And what do you think?" And, or later on when you're getting ready to go to bed and she sees you and she's like, "Hey, you got a minute? Let me tell you about this guy that's liking me at school. I don't know what to do about this,"
Yeah.
those kind of things. But she needs those kind of random moments. Now, why do I say that? Well, what I've seen happen in our culture of late, and again, please hear me on this.
Right.
I'm not against women working. I'm not against women being successful. All those, I'm 100% for that. My wife was very successful and worked and all that stuff. But in the process of doing all that, in us keeping up with the Joneses and having double
Mhm.
incomes and all that, we haven't given space for those serendipitous moments to take place with our
Mm.
girls.
Yeah.
Moms are so busy getting ready for tomorrow and getting the
Yeah.
kids shuffled everywhere that they often don't have those spaces. So for the mom to be able to create space and time for her daughter to have some one-on-one time with her is critical. Now, that may be intentional in the sense that maybe they're not as serendipitous as the girl would like, but maybe she says to her in the morning, on Saturday, hey, let you and I go take a walk, and we're going to
Yeah.
walk, and go take a hike for an hour, or 30 minutes or whatever.
Mhm.
And but just creating those moments where she knows that she has your undivided attention
Mm.
and she is able to really connect, and you are constantly curious about what is going on in her heart, and you
Yeah.
express that to her, and affirming her in the good things you see happening in her life and the things she's doing, the way she nurtures, the way she cares, the way she initiates, um any of those kind of things that you see going on. Kids are always much more prone to open up if they hear more positives from their parents about who they are than negatives. Because if they
Yeah.
open up and they feel like all you do is tell negative things,
Right.
they're going like, ugh, she's just going to criticize me on this. So
Right. Oh man, that is such a good point. And I'm going to say something risky here. That I think involves perhaps maybe taking a look at one's schedule and realizing
yeah,
what is something that I can give up that is actually not helping for the kingdom, because there's this idol that's been set up in culture to where our kids need to be overscheduled and over involved in everything to be well rounded. And you know what? Maybe it's the dance class or the soccer or whatever, that it just needs to go because it's infringing on our ability to pour into our kids. When we only get 2 minutes maybe in the car, or they're so worn out that they can't speak, they don't want to talk to us, they just want to just veg in the back, then maybe that's a sign that we need to let go of some of these false idols of activities that we've raised up in our family home to make room for the most vital work, kingdom work, and discipleship.
yeah,
It's dicey in our culture today to say that, but I think it needs to be.
yeah. I'm with you 100%. With you
So
100.
So what just for the last thing, our last question here, of maybe there is not a mom that's present or active. We offered tips for the guys, for the girls. What are some ideas on what can a family do to help build up the daughters in their home, to be connected to those womanly influences?
Well, in many ways, much like the moms who have dads absent, dads who have females absent, moms absent, need to make sure their girls have exposure to some healthy women.
Mm,
And again, to be honest, I think it's a lot easier to get women to get involved with girls than it is to get guys to get involved with kids that are not theirs.
yeah,
So I do think it's going to be a little bit easier. There's lots of women's groups that the girls can be involved with, women's activities
yeah,
that they would be more than happy to see the young girls be a part of.
yeah,
Women are so much more nurturing in that sense than the guys are. And
yeah,
so I think just having them exposed to those women and being around those women, and then for the guys, if a woman is not present, for the dad to acknowledge, there are aspects of who you are as a girl that I don't fully get because I'm not a girl, but I'm going to make sure, I want to help you through this process, and I want to
mm,
make sure you're connected to good, healthy women.
mm,
And what we typically see for girls is that other people in the family
yeah,
are so much more apt to jump in and
yeah,
be supportive of the girls than they are guys.
mm,
It's just the nature of nurture with women.
yeah,
Y'all are so much better at that, especially across generations and with each other
mm,
than the guys are. So I
mm.
think just having her around those women is going to be huge.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And maybe even, if you're a church leader listening, what I've noticed some events will do, and they'll have a ladies retreat, but they'll allow some of the older teens to be involved, like the high school
Yeah.
age teens are allowed to be there, which is great because now you've got ladies who are college age all the way toward grandmother age, and yet you've got these young girls who are able to be there and be nurtured by women in different ages and stages. So maybe as a church, practically, we can start having more discipleship opportunities within the church on these young girls to get them connected to the older, the wiser, the more seasoned ladies of the group, to be able to nurture that discipleship that may be lacking within their own homes.
Yeah, I love it.
All right. So, Ricky, just as we round out, if someone is just listening to this podcast alone, what are some ways in which they can connect with you, your favorite resources, that sort of thing?
Yeah. Our ministry is at livehope.org. So livehope.org. We have tons of resources there. There's a talk that I do about this tomboy versus girly girl. That's there about halfway down the page. They can get that. It's on demand, and so they can watch that video of me explaining all that. And then also, if you're looking for resources, we have another site called biblicalsexuality.net, where we list a whole bunch of resources and books. We have you guys' books there, and lots of other books from folks that we love and trust and have a great Christian worldview. And so those are safe books, I call them, for people to look at and read and recommend. So I would definitely recommend checking all of those out. And obviously, I mean, all the stuff y'all offer has great resources for parents and helping them raise these wonderful Christian young people.
Yeah, amen. Oh, well, Ricky, thank you so much for all of your time that you've donated here at Mama Bear, just to help speak life into these moms and dads and mamas, Papa Bears, grandparents. If this has been a blessing to you, hop on our website, mamabearapologetics.com, for more resources, blogs, podcasts to help you steward this next generation to be warriors in the faith. Ricky, thank you again for joining us. And parents, we will see you next time.